So if you were talking to a smart student that had a 3.2 GPA and no internships, what would the fastest path be for them to actually be competitive within 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, it's hard because, I actually think that GPAs are a huge scam because if you think about how GPAs are measured, it's basically measuring how well you can one shot a curriculum. Uh, you usually fail by learning. And so, but a GPA will not reflect that. And there's going to be a disproportionate, uh, ratio between how good your GPA is versus how much you actually learned. And so the people that tend to learn the most are the ones that have failed the most. And so if you're that 3.2 GPA student and you want to stand out, there are a ton of opportunities for you to stand out besides open source projects. Like you can work on novel research or make a discovery that no one has ever thought of before and publish a paper on it, right? Or you can create a business or build an app. Like I feel like everyone nowadays has super intelligence at their fingertips. Like building is now easier than it ever has been. So, there is a lot of opportunity for you to like really showcase yourself as a world-class individual. And what you're really trying to do is just convince companies that you might not be world-class in academics, but you might be world-class at the business side, or you might be world-class at building, right? There's so many senior engineers who are pivotal that are generational to our, core foundation of like software development. Like think of the people who invented like Linux, the people who invented Python, right? A lot of these people can't solve Leetcode problems, right? And that's fine because they have bigger trophies, right? And that's what you're looking for.
Your point about GPA is super interesting. And you're so right there. Like a GPA, what does that actually optimize for if you click into it? A 4.0 GPA means that a student essentially never failed, like in their first try, right? Every single class they took, every single exam, they essentially got near 90+% or even 100%, right? So what it incentivizes for is low risk taking, right? Because there's students who have that 4.0 streak, they don't want to take hard classes, ideally, right? They don't want to take a class they're not 100% sure they could keep up that streak in. Whereas, like, if you look at actual builders or people who change the world, they usually have a string of failures and one massive success. So it's almost the inverse, right? Like, even Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton is known for obviously inventing calculus, but like he actually did more work in theology and alchemy than calculus. And both of those completely crashed and burned and went nowhere, right? But he's known as the inventor of calculus and one of the greatest mathematicians to ever live because of his one success and his like dozens of failures. But if Isaac Newton was concerned about his 4.0 GPA, he probably would have done the great things he's done, So what do you think about that? Do you feel like actually my question here is like, do companies still look at GPA as that golden metric?
Yeah, I don't think that companies care as much about GPA, but my word of advice is that if your GPA is under 3.7, it probably looks better for you to just leave it out of your resume. I think in general, GPAs are basically a credit score for other universities, and companies generally don't care. The universities are using that basically as a metric to calculate risk. They want you to be able to complete the degree. And so they're measuring what are the chances that you might drop out, you might not be successful, you might not like it here. And so I don't think it actually is widely regarded within the industry as much anymore. And I think that the people that care about it might be a little bit behind the times.
So you would actually suggest, unless your GPA is amazing, just leave it out entirely. Like it's not worth it.
Yeah. I think it could have a negative effect on your resume. And I think that, the people's expectations have gone up a lot. And so I think, if you have a 3.7 or lower, it might be more advantageous for you to just say graduated year date or class of, 2025.
Do you think it's even worth trying to get all A's? Or is it a kind of situation where you kind of want to just scrape by with like a 3.5 or a 3.4 maybe?
I think it's diminishing returns for sure, right? Like it's not that people who are A students learn 10 times more than people who are B students. I think if you're optimizing for growth, I think you want to be as well-rounded as a person as possible. But if you can manage your 4.0 while being well-rounded, of course, that's even better.
Awesome. So if you had to summarize 2026 hiring in one sentence, what would it be?
Yeah. I think if you can't get a job in 2026, it's probably your fault.
Let's hear about it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, this is a super controversial take, but I think that, you know, it's a good thing that it's your fault, because that means that there are areas that you can improve, whether it be networking or improving your technical skills, or, you know, maybe even growing your soft skills, right? What you don't want is to be stuck in a situation where you have absolutely zero control. Then you're like absolutely screwed. But, you know, if it's your fault, there are things that you can do and things that you can change that ultimately make it under your own control.
This is why I hate the phrase, the job market is bad or the market is cooked. Because when people say that, they kind of externalize control, like you're saying. They're blaming this external force, which is the market, where they can't actually control anything or do anything there. So in their mind, it's like, oh, well, can't do it. It's not my fault. I can't change anything. But you really can. Like, as you were just saying, there's so many things that you can do to get a job. And we've seen this. Like, I run this coaching thing. We've helped hundreds of students get jobs in tech. And once they start to change 5, 10, 15 small things, the results start to come. So it's pretty clear that there is the ability to make a difference in your actual application history. Do you feel like a lot of people tend to just kind of externalize control these days?
100%. I think it's always easier to blame and whine about it than take accountability.
Yeah, I'm sure people will even listen to this and be like, oh, the market's bad. But like the smart people are listening, being like, what are these tips and tricks that we're talking about today that I can apply to my actual application process to improve my chances of getting a job?
It's going to be impossible for world-class people to be unemployed. And the market does a really good job of rewarding those who have merit.
Let's talk about the ATS. So most applicants believe there's some invisible AI system auto-rejecting them, that if this ATS was thrown out the window, they would just have a shot, but alas, the AI just hates them, right? Tell me, is that ATS idea even real? And what's going on behind the scenes?
So there is an ATS, but I don't think that there's this like magical AI behind the curtains doing all of the work. I actually wish there was. I wish that there was a more reliable system, because this is actually the part of recruiting that is typically the most tedious. When you're just sifting through, you know, thousands and thousands of resumes, you know, most of the time people are getting these rejection letters because they are simply just not a good fit, and they don't realize that, you know, the role that they're applying for is actually just not what the team or the company is looking for. It's a harsh reality, because the role might say ML engineer, and you've done ML before in the past, but they might be looking for other stuff that is not listed in the job description, or maybe there has been shifts in the way that the other teams have been scoped, and so therefore like this role has implicitly changed over time. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and hiring by no means is inefficient. So by no means is efficient. And so, you know, when someone applies and the resume dropped into this bucket, someone on the other side is actually skimming and reading the resume, spending time to actually parse through what you did before that rejection letter is ultimately sent out.
So are almost all rejections in big tech done by a human?
I would say most of them are, but they're done with tools too. So there is no AI, because inference costs would be insane. But there is keyword search and Boolean searches in the background to identify which batch of, you know, candidates belong in what bucket, right? And so, you know, imagine if you're a hardware company and you're a data scientist applying for a software engineering role, you're probably going to have no business at the hardware company. You know, the data science and hardware is completely opposite sides of the spectrum in most cases. And so you can imagine that a recruiter might, you know, put in quotations data scientist to see, you know, which of the batch of candidates were data scientists, so that they can mass reject them. Terrible example, but generally that's how it works.
Quick pause. If you're a computer science student, new grad, or early career software engineer trying to break into AI, we're doing a live workshop in March with Ben Chen, a Tesla AI recruiter. He's going to break down what AI ready actually means in 2026, what projects and resume elements actually get attention from people trying to make the pivot to AI, and the fastest path to make that career change without wasting months and months or even years trying to survive in the age of AI. Now, if you want into this workshop, you need to apply and enroll in the Software Engineering Accelerator by March 15th, 2026. So go ahead and check the top link in the description to submit an application to join us and talk with our admissions team. If you're accepted and enrolled by March 15th, you'll get access to the workshop and we'll be able to talk directly with Ben.